Welcome back to Zymol's Ugly Dog Studio. Get ready to meet the heart and soul of Sadowsky Guitars, Roger Sadowsky. Hey everybody, welcome to NAMM. This is Ugly Dog Studio, and I'm Chuck Bennett. We are with the Roger Sadowsky, the guy that makes the most beautiful guitars and the most wonderful basses this side of the solar system. Roger.
How are you, Chuck?
Good morning.
To see you again.
Good morning, yeah. You know, part of this whole idea of getting together is to talk a little bit about how did this all come about. But I think to start with, maybe we need to have a little history about Roger. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, my history is I'm a New York City boy. I'm born and raised in New York City, and I was late to guitar. I started playing guitar at the end of my junior year in college. I went to a folk festival. It was 1968, and there were all.
Was it with a girl?
No,
Oh.
by myself.
Oh.
And there were all these long-haired hippies and quilts and macrame, and I just felt at home there.
Wow.
So I started, the next day I went, my friend took me and got me my first guitar, and I started teaching myself how to fingerpick, and I got pretty obsessed over the guitar and started my hippie transformation. And but then I graduated college with a degree in psychology, and I went to graduate school. I was working on a doctorate in psychobiology.
Wow.
And I was miserable in graduate school. But I was doing brain surgery on rats, and it occurred to me that if I can do that, I could build a guitar. So I spent a year writing guitar makers.
That was the aha moment?
Well, it was like I wanted to get out of the rat race. Nixon was cutting all the funding to the sciences. So
Right.
the normal career progression of becoming an assistant professor and then getting a research grant, there was no grant money. So that whole career looked hopeless at that point.
Yeah.
And meanwhile, I literally became passionately obsessed about guitar making. And so I spent a year writing guitar makers all over the world, didn't get anywhere. I finally found a guy who was building acoustic guitars in New Jersey named Augie Laprinzi, and I talked him into hiring me, and I worked with him for 2 years, and that's how I got started.
Wow, wow. So the first step was not electric, it was just
Acoustic,
just straight acoustic.
flat tops. That was my original passion.
Wow.
You know.
And then as you progressed, what suddenly changed? Where did we come up with the F-hole guitar, the semi-acoustic, and the arch tops? How did that all happen?
Well, I had been doing, after I stopped building flat tops, I went in heavily into repair and restoration because I felt I could make a living right away that way, whereas as a builder, it takes years to establish a reputation.
Right.
So I started my own shop in New York in '79. And starting around '82, I started servicing Jim Hall's guitars and became friends with Jim. And then about 10 years later, 15 years later, there was this big archtop guitar boom going on. And guys were making hand-carved acoustic archtops ranging from $10,000 to $30,000. And it occurred to me that I think every investment banker, doctor, lawyer, and dentist who could afford one of those probably had them already. But how does a working musician afford a $30,000 instrument? And then how do you go and take it on gigs as opposed to keeping it in your show?
Yeah.
The other thing was that the tendency was to make them more and more lightweight and acoustically resonant. And I felt that was counterintuitive to how well they could have performed through an amplifier because they would just feed back easier and quicker. So I started thinking about making a laminated archtop as early as '88. And it's, ideas sometimes take a decade to foment in your brain. And I said to Jim, if I could make a reasonably affordable quality archtop that you would be willing to play, would you endorse it? Because he had never endorsed a single product in his entire career.
Wow.
And he said yes. He said, even my students can't find a good guitar today. So I started the quest and the R&D, and the issue was the laminates. I first started working with someone domestically on the laminates. We couldn't get them thin enough. They were too thick and too heavy. I then started getting samples from Germany. I didn't like them. And the only place I could get the laminates made that I was happy with was in Japan. So I already had my guy Yoshi, who was my production manager for my Japanese bass production in Japan. And so we put together a production, and we decided to have the whole instrument made in Japan. I make the tailpieces, I make the bridges, we do the fretwork. It's our electronics, but the rest of the instrument is made in Japan. And
They're gorgeous.
I couldn't be happier with it. Jim Hall, from 2003 till his death a year ago, this was the only guitar he played. This is the Jim Hall model, and that was my first art shop.
Wow.
So I've been very happy with how they've been received amongst the players, and you know, I mean, this is the kind of guitar that you can easily take on a plane in a gig bag, as opposed to a big arch top like this.
Right.
This is very travel friendly, and it still sounds like a big fat arch top.
And looks like a $30,000 guitar.
Thank you.
I mean, it really does.
Thank you.
Tell me about the first guitar you made. The first one. Do you still have it?
I actually do.
Really?
I'm amazed that I do, but I do.
Wow.
The first guitar I made from scratch, even at that point, which was 1980, I was still thinking that they should be lightweight and resonant. I felt that everything I learned as an acoustic guitar maker still applied to solid body electric. And I was one of the first people in the early 80s to pioneer lightweight resonant solid bodies, because everyone was making these 12-pound exotic Wenge, you know, all this African hardwoods. You know, they make great coffee tables, but they weren't making great guitars. And so I did a chambered telly body style guitar with 2 humbuckers, and I made my first 20 guitars under the name Dr. Frets.
Dr. Frets.
Yeah, and then I smacked myself and said, you're Sadowsky, call him Sadowsky.
Sadowsky.
You know, I didn't have a easy off-the-tongue name like Fender or Parker or, you know, anything like that. So at first I was a little hesitant to use Sadowsky, but I'm the builder, that's my name.
Have you ever made a guitar that you fell in love with after you made it? Not the first one, but ever made one years later that you regret selling?
No.
Okay.
I've actually, other than that first guitar, I've never kept the guitar I made. You know, when you're a really small business, the pressure for cash flow and to pay your bills and to pay your employees is so intense. I never had the luxury to hold the guitar back and keep it for myself, honestly.
Wow, wow. Okay, so you're a player. If you could have a Sadowsky guitar, that's kind of a strange question. If you could own a Sadowsky guitar, which one would you own?
Well, what I would own is, after a 20-plus year hiatus, I've gone back to making flat top acoustics again.
Really?
And it used to be my avocation.
Does the world know this?
A little bit.
They're going to know it now, you know.
Yeah, I know.
Okay.
I used to continue to build as an avocation 1 or 2 a year. But when my son was born 22 years ago, I didn't want an excuse for spending more time at work. So I just put it on the back burner and now he's graduated college.
Right.
And now I'm trying to devote some time every week. I'm working on a batch of 4 now. I did 2 last year. So I'd really like to, if I could by next year be making 1 acoustic a month, I would be a very happy man.
Wow. Might be fun. We're going to be visiting soon and doing an interview with Vince Gill. So it might be fun to see if we can get one of your flat tops in his hands.
Well, thanks. Vince knows me.
Yeah.
When he was touring, Michael Rhodes and Big Al Anderson were part of his band, and they both play my instruments. So he knows me.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. So we've got these flat tops are coming back. Okay, so the world, you should know that the Sadowsky flat top is coming out soon.
Yeah, but I don't want to take orders for them. I just want to build what I want to build, and then.
So if you're lucky to get one,
right.
You're lucky to get one. Okay, so, all right. So now we've got, building a guitar. If someone said to me, Chuck, you need to build a guitar. I most of the time, I can cook, and that's what our company does. I don't do anything that's very high tech.
I see you in a cauldron.
Cauldron, that's
stirring.
Stirring, right? And the bats are flying above. But where do you start? How did you finally come up with the combination of this is the right wood, this is the right materials, this is the right pickup windings? How does that happen?
It happened from doing repairs and restorations and modifications for many years, working with all the top pros in New York, all the session guys. And by working on their instruments, look, for example, my typical thing back in '80 is I would tell the guys, go out, buy a good 60s Strat or P bass or J bass, get one for $800. Bring it to me. I would retrue the fingerboard, refret it, make a new nut, shield the electronics, do all of my stuff that I know how to do.
Sadowsky magic.
And then some instruments were like magically transformed, and some weren't much better than when I started. And I started looking at what that was. And that's when I keyed into the idea that it was the lighter weight, more resonant, solid bodies that always had the better voice. And so that's when I started to focus on that the wood was still the most important thing in a solid body instrument.
Wow.
Everyone at that time was heavy brass hardware, hot pickups, phase switches, all that stuff. It's the wood. Unless the wood sounds great, none of that stuff's going to make a difference.
Wow.
So I still select my woods as if I were building acoustic guitars. I tap on them, I listen to them. I can tell you what effect a maple fingerboard has on tone versus a rosewood fingerboard. I can tell you the difference an alder body and an ash body or a maple body will have on the tone. So that's why I always wanted to keep my business small enough where I could have a dialogue with the player, get to know what he hears in his head as much as possible, what style of playing he has, so I can help him select the woods that will help give him the sound he has in his head.
Leads me to my next question. I buy a Sadowsky guitar or bass, and I have questions about my instrument. Would I end up, if I really wanted to, ended up talking to Roger Sadowsky?
Absolutely. Anybody who needs to talk to me. I have my sales manager, Dan, who handles most of the calls, but there's no question about it. I pick up the phone as often as anybody else in the shop.
Wow. So there is a direct link between the creator and the owner.
Well, again, as far as how I scaled my business, I had an epiphany in the early '80s that as much as I love the woodworking craft, a guitar or a bass is an inanimate object. It can't love you back. And I realized that all of the satisfaction came from dealing with the player. And it doesn't come from dealing with the buyer for a music store. It comes from dealing with the player. And so I adopted a business model very early of selling direct. And I felt for my size business, I could sell everything I made. And so I always wanted to have that interaction and conversation with the player. So for us, it's not about selling instruments, it's about establishing relationships with people.
Yep.
when I get that email a week after they get their instrument of just how much they love it, that's what keeps me going. You know, that's the satisfaction right there.
Wow.
And again, you can't get that satisfaction from dealing with a buyer for a
So
music
right
store.
now, I won't find a Sadowsky guitar in a music shop?
Yeah,
or
the
I
only
could?
thing I sell in a music shop are these instruments here.
Yeah.
This is my Metro line, and that's I make that in Japan. Obviously, Japan's not a cheap place to build.
No, not.
And
Nothing's cheap in Japan.
right, but it's the only place outside of my shop where I can get the quality that I want.
Wow.
My distributor in Japan hired a guy, an existing builder who wanted to work with me, I mean, passionately. And he hired him, and in '91, he came over from Japan. He left his wife and 2 small children for 10 months to work by my side for
Wow.
10 months. And then he went back to Japan and started the Tokyo workshop. And we don't use any existing factories in Japan. He put together a crew of industry veteran craftsmen that he knew, and we put our own workshop together. And he supervises everything, and he's like the guardian of my reputation in Japan.
So what we've got is we've got a Sadowsky basses and guitars, or just basses?
In Japan, we're doing guitars too, but I haven't been selling them outside of Japan yet.
Right.
But we have a line of Metro line guitar. The line is called Metro line, and so we have a line of basses and we have a line of guitars.
The instruments look beautiful. I personally have had a chance to play a few of them, and you know, I'm amazed. I'm totally amazed at how they feel.
Thank you.
They have the feel like when you pick up a Sadowsky instrument. I always feel like I've always had it in my arms, and I'm not sure what that is. I don't know if that's part of Roger being part of the instrument.
I'm sure
but,
it is.
But it's there. It makes me.
Thank you.
It's a warm feeling.
You know, one of the things I wanted to share with you is a lot of people wonder why my instruments are so Fender derivative, okay? And the reason of that, if back in 1980, if you got the New York Musicians Union Directory, there were 2 chapters for bass. There was acoustic bass and there was Fender bass. All electric basses were considered Fender bass. Most of the business in those days, besides record dates, were jingle dates, commercials. They were 40-minute sessions. You could not walk into one of those sessions without a P bass or a J bass, because the engineer didn't have 10 minutes to play with the dials to
wire up an acoustic.
Wire up a new bass that he wasn't familiar with.
That's right.
So, for both my clients' needs and the needs of the studios, I needed a bass that essentially looked like a Fender. So what I started doing, by the mid-'80s, the vintage market took off. And so those $800 60s instruments that I was advising all of my customers to pick up, I realized then that everything I was doing to improve them was devaluing them once the vintage market took off. So that's when I felt I could make a new instrument that would bring everything I could bring to the table. And so that's when I really started building my own stuff.
Let me ask you about the customers you have. Because obviously you've talked to them, we've talked about that. What percentage would you say of the customers you have are people that just love to play versus people who love to play that are professional?
Well, 30 years ago, 80% of my customers were full-time working musicians.
Wow.
By 84, 85, all the session bass players were starting to lose work because of synthesizers. Within 10 years, almost all the guitar players were losing work due to computers. Then all the guys who made a living doing club dates and weddings and bar mitzvahs, they were losing work to DJs.
Wow, yeah.
So today, honestly, I would say 25% of my clients are full-time working musicians. A lot of them are guys like yourself who have played since you were young, have a good job and can afford to buy yourself an instrument. Some of them still gig in like a bar band for fun on Friday and Saturday.
Or church or,
or
synagogue. Right?
Church is probably the #1 place my instruments get played. And honestly, that's become one of the main outlets for people who love to play today, to be able to play in an ensemble, in a band.
Well, you've always got a gig and it's always on the same day, so it works out pretty good. That's what my son tells me, right? He plays bass. Yeah, they are magnificent. Let's talk just a moment about coloration and styling, because I know that building these is a lot of it's personal choice.
Right.
But you seem to be able to create these mosaics that are absolute knockout and seem to have the kind of fashion and fashion sense that people are looking for today. How does this all come about? What do you do?
It's just, it's very organic. Again, you can see the Fender design
DNA,
carrying through, but something like this is not Fender-like, in my opinion.
No.
But what we're doing now, because of the Metro line, is I've become like my own custom shop. So now, because this covers all the basic models at a more affordable price, I can concentrate on using just the most gorgeous eye candy woods that doesn't sacrifice tone.
Got it. God, they're beautiful.
Thank you.
I'm thrilled. Okay, everybody. Is there anything else that we want to talk about?
No, I just want to thank you for bringing some amazing new product to the guitar industry, and you're doing a great thing.
Thank you. Roger Sadowsky, Sadowsky Guitars and Basses. Look them up on the web. Go to their Facebook page. If you don't own one, you better ask yourself why. Catch you later, everybody. Bye-bye.